My name is Yuri Dekiba, and currently I am at Akamai Technologies, and I am a Senior Director for Sales Operations and Planning. And my scope of responsibility in my current role is to provide business and productivity insights into Akamai's sales management team, as well as working closely with the Geo Sales Operations team. I have over 20 plus years of experience, majority of them in sales and revenue operations. Starting from way back when I started out as a junior inside sales rep, when I first started my journey with the high tech sales focus area back in Symantec. I thought this would be a good topic to discuss. And when I mentioned process of investing in technology, what we could focus on today is really looking at how we have traditionally looked at investing in sales technology, specifically in my case, right, with a focus on supporting sales, and how we need to consider adjusting how we think about this and the approach we have historically taken, and why, primarily driven by the changes that we continue to see in the market, as well as changes in not only our own buying behavior, but our own customers' buying behavior, and how we might apply that learning in the context of how we as an organization think about investing in technology to support our sales team. I think many of us who have been involved in any technology purchase are probably more familiar to the traditional approach of what we might also call like a waterfall project management type approach, where you take a sequence of steps, one after the other. So, for example, you first identify what your business challenge is that you're trying to address with support of a technology. Then you drive the business requirements. Then you might generate an RFP and then send it out to various vendors to review. And then they will come back to us to do a demo, occasionally a pilot. And then we make a purchase decision. Then once we purchase, we do an UAT, we do design decisions in-house. Then we implement, then we train the users, and we continually figure out how to reinforce the usage of the new technology investment to drive adoption. So that's probably in a nutshell what many of us are used to in the past, how we may have gone about thinking about investing in technology. I think right now we're probably in a phase that I see personally as well, and many of our listeners might, that is kind of a mix of that traditional past approach that we just talked about into something that might be slightly different. And some of the things that I'm seeing today is, depending on the company and the organizational size and the maturity of the company. For instance, in many startups and growth mode companies, I think they have more younger generations that are used to real-time access to apps at your fingertips, and or bring your own device. I've used this app. Could we potentially use it? And they have the flexibility to test it out. When you're in mid to larger size organization, and or you're in an industry which requires more compliance or security or legal requirements, you may have some of those constraints that you need to also balance, which tends to push us back into more of that traditional approach of a step-by-step sequenced approach. So what I'm starting to see is, depending on the person you're speaking to, whether it's generational or the company situation that you have, you're going to start to see a mix of the different preferences and how we might want to go about considering investing in a sales technology. That's a fun topic, I think. So where we are now, as I mentioned earlier, where I think we're starting to see different approaches and preferences, whether generational, driven by company requirements or whatnot. I think some of the things we need to think about when we think about investing in technology for the future is really to, similar to the project management world, we mentioned waterfall approach, right, in the past approach. More and more, we see and hear reference to agile, right? We got to be agile. We got to be iterative. We got to deliver quick, but still be iterative so we can deliver what the customer wants faster. I think we need to consider balancing that too and be more open to being agile in larger companies and or more compliance and requirement driven industries. We tend to default to one side or the other, and we're a little bit more hesitant and risk averse to being more reactive and agile and let's test and iterate. I think we want to have a sequence of steps so that we cover all the ducks in a row. But the needs of the organization, that is a primary reason we're investing in any technology. When we think about investing in technology in-house, right, sometimes you need to meet those needs sooner than later. And so I think it's a matter of, we need to think about how do we become more agile while managing some of those risk and security requirements, but also how do we also deliver faster what, in my case, the sales ops world, the sales teams need to enable them quicker, um, versus whenever we get a request, we say, great, let us understand your business challenge and the requirements. We want to do that due diligence, but how do we balance that so that we can deliver more quickly what they need so they can be effective in what they need to do? Yes, great question. I think a couple of key things, and these might seem like it's kind of obvious, but I think it's the reason why I'm sharing this is the obvious are typically the ones that we need to put top of mind, right? One is be open to new ideas. Whether as an organization or as an individual, we're all going to have our own preferences or the way we've done things. But being open to new ideas is, I think, important so that you can understand, well, what are the benefits of considering an alternative approach to the way we have been doing things? And you'd be surprised how much creative ideas might be generated by just being open to listening to others' perspective. The second is mentioning kind of the need to adopt more the agile approach to looking at investing in technology. This seems like a contradictory phrase, but I think this is so key. Think about how to effectively balance speed with quality. Typically, it kind of feels like the opposite, right? If you're trying to deliver quickly, you're going to be impacting quality. But how do we do that? And in support of that, I think part of that is managing expectations and stakeholders by really focusing on what the change means, the change in the approach we're introducing or the change in the ideas that we're introducing, being very hyper conscious of that, because socialization in advance of any idea is so key for you to be able to more quickly pivot and make those changes and decisions. And so, ongoing, even though it takes a lot of time, socialization, stakeholder engagement, and communicating with them is key. So, the third piece would be more focusing on what we would call the people side of change or change management, much more than we think we need to. Yes, so a couple of resources. We touched on change management a little bit. If you are interested in finding out more, but in a more storytelling approach, so it's an easy read, I would highly recommend starting out with a book called Our Iceberg is Melting by John Cotter. And John Cotter is one of the leaders when we think about change and change management. He has a very theoretical book, but this is a storytelling book where it's about a couple of penguins on an iceberg. And it's about one penguin's journey where he is calling out, our iceberg is melting, let's do something. But you have elders that are resisting, and so it kind of helps you understand what are things to think about when you're introducing change in a very fun way. Another one I think would be useful is a book called Power of Habit that many of you might know by Charles Duhigg, Duhigg. And this actually was really insightful for me to understand, even when you think about change, there's an aspect of habit in there. And understanding biologically what triggers us to have a habit or default to an existing habit, what do you need to create net new habit, is something that we should think about, because any organizational change is going to impact individuals, and every individual has a habit. So understanding some of that dynamic of how the biological aspect of what drives habit is very helpful and insightful. And finally, related to technology, One of the great resources that I find that is also up to date is a website called Smart Selling Tools, which is kind of by Nancy Nardine, that many people probably are aware. I found them very interesting because they do a really good job of listing out some of the capabilities that technologies provide in a easy to consume manner, and it probably has the most latest information. And if you were to visit her site, it's just fascinating how maybe 10 years ago, when you think of CRM, you just thought of maybe five handful of key leaders and vendors in that area for CRM. There's so many that are out there now that tout the CRM functionality. So I always like to look at the smart selling tools landscape of sales technology to see what's out there to keep myself informed.